Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. How about a video for those of us that want to step into tooling some leather? Now technically, tooling is a catch-all word. It simply means to use tools to emboss an impression into leather. But for us leather crafters, it's a combination of carving and stamping. Now we've got a simple but beautiful design here. It's going to give us time to come up to speed, get comfortable with the tools. But the big point here, once we get up to speed, unlimited design possibilities. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there, going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table, look at our design. We've got a very simple design to work with. The biggest point there, for those of us that are new, we don't have to make a lot of tight curves and bends. We can get comfortable with the tools before we start doing more complicated work. Now, this is typically larger than I go with this design. Again, the same reason. We don't have a lot of tight curves and bends, but still, this is 5 by 7.5. This is going to fit on most any Bible cover for a mid-sized Bible and easily for a journal cover. Now, we don't have to create our own designs. I like to because that's absolutely mine. But the point is, we've got what's called tracing film. We can lay this in on just about any printed material. We can draw in our design, transfer that over to our wet leather, trace it in, easy enough to transfer any design. Now, on our tracing film, a good point. There are two sides to this. We've got a matte side, and we've got a glossy side. Let's trace on our matte side. Let's draw on that. One more point. So right here, that's going to be a tough design to try to measure and draw 4 times. Don't worry about that. Let's take a piece of poster board. Let's draw in our design, but then let's fold that in half and cut it. That means that that's perfectly symmetrical, and when we draw this in, perfectly consistent. In fact, that's a trick we can use in all kinds of places. Okay, so we've got a feel for our design. Let's step over and prep our leather. If we want to add an impression into our leather, we're going to have to add water. Well, that brings up a good point, because for us crafters, there are 2 types of leather we're going to work with. The first is a chrome tan. This is not going to accept water. In fact, it's tanned to resist water because this is for our garment and our upholstery projects. The other is a veg tan. This will absolutely accept water. In fact, we can stamp, carve, wet form, dye, antique, top coat. This is my favorite leather to work with. This is our Shaheen leather. Now, it's called a strap leather. That doesn't mean we can only use this for strapping. That's just a designation by the tannery. Now, there are 2 ways to add water. First off, let's use our sponge. Get some good water content in this, and as consistently as we can, let's add water to our leather. Well, there's the problem. Consistency. So say we've got a higher water content here, lower down here. We'll get a nice stamp impression here without trying. Down here, we're going to struggle. That's a recipe for disaster. So what we're going to do, let's case our leather. That's going to give us the best outcome. And it's not a difficult process. So let's take our piece of leather, and I'm going to run this through my water. Okay, 1 pass. Let's come back through again. And then 1 more good pass. Very nice. Okay, now let's sit this on our table, and I'm going to give this about half an hour. Right where it is, we're going to let some of that excess moisture evaporate. All told, we've given this about 40 minutes, but I can feel it's got some good moisture content. It's got a little bit of weight to it, but I don't have excess water sitting on the surface. Now, the 2 big points here. First off, consistency across our leather. We actually can't miss. But secondly, the water is starting to soften the fibers within the leather. So next step, let's take a baggie. I'm going to put this in my baggie. There we go. Now, I'd like to give that overnight, but I'd like to go no less than 3 hours, but we can go as much as 4 or 5 days. The longer it sits, the more consistent that moisture. So let's give that about 3 hours. I've actually given this about 4 hours, but the longer we go, the more consistent the moisture, but also the softer the fibers. Last step, let's pull our piece of leather out. Good. Now I'm going to leave this right where it is, because I want this to start to return to its natural color. So let's give this about an hour, see where we are. So after 1 hour, I can start to feel it's beginning to feel a little bit more dry, still a little bit dark. Now I said let's let this return to its natural color. What I meant was its original color. So with this in mind, let's give it 1 more hour. 1 more hour, almost perfect. In fact, there's a piece. Good, almost back to our original color. Very nice. Let's take our design, drop in our impression. Let's start by tracing in our design. Now, I like to cut my tracing film same size as my panel. Then I'll do all my measurements, all my centering here, so that when I go to carve, I don't have to guess where my design needs to be. I know exactly where it's going to land. So let's tape this down with some painter's tape. Just about any tape will do. But one good point, this is our marble. That is the center of a leather shop, and we're going to use that on every project. Okay, we've got that. Now, we can always use a scribe. In fact, we've got a great scribe. It's got a fine point and a ball point on that, but also a simple pen, pencil will work. Now, our straight lines have to be straight. We could freehand this, and I could probably do a pretty good job. Let's don't do that. In fact, when we draw this in, and when we use our swivel, we're going to actually use our straight edge. Again, we want our straight lines to be straight. So let's trace this in. Okay, we've got that. Now, our last 4 lines, I don't really need to draw these in because we're just going to go from one point to the next. So let's just make a small impression. Well, there we are. I can see that, easily done, okay? Now, our first step when we're carving, let's go with a swivel knife. This is our basic swivel knife, and it's gonna work fine. It's a good tool. It's adjustable, it's comfortable in my hand. Right here, we've got a 1/2-inch flat blade. That's my favorite blade for doing larger work. Again, it's a good tool, yet inexpensive. My favorite. This is our Ergo swivel. To me, just exceptionally comfortable in my hand. Same blade, but this is the hollow ground. Now, 2 good points. Much like an 8-year-old, our leather is very impressionable. So we want to be careful with our tools. But secondly, let's make sure we trim our pinky fingernails because it is so very common to have impressions from our fingernail. Now, like I said, straight lines, absolutely. So let's use our square. So I'm going to drop this in on my line. There we go. Let's see if I can make that a little easier to see. Now, there are so many out there that are far more capable of teaching swivel work than I am, but I hope I can at least get us started. So what I want to do, so I'm going to put the saddle of my knife right in my finger, and I'm just going to draw the knife towards me. Let's do that one more time, okay? Now I'm going to jump down. I'm coming in just on the outside of my curve. Yeah, there we go. We've got a good clean swivel cut. What we don't want to do is lean left or right because that's going to develop a lip that we don't want. All right, so let's do the same thing on this side. When we get down to our curves, let's just take our time. Let's make one easy pass. Come back with a second pass and make that a little bit deeper, maybe a third. The point there is we're going easy. That just makes it easier on our hand to get a good clean line. And we've got our curves in. Okay, now let's just go from point to point. Good, we've got that. Okay, the balance, let's just take our time, do our best to follow our line. Good, our swivel cuts are in. Now, if all our points don't meet exactly, what we can do is take the corner of our swivel and press that in. That'll give us a nice corner there. And very nice, our swivel cuts are in. Let's switch over to a smooth bevel. I feel like I keep wanting to apologize in every scene because when we use a swivel and a straight edge, virtually impossible to get a good camera shot. Yeah, I tried, but hopefully it's going to get a little easier. Now our swivel knife basically cutting a V. So what we're going to do is take a bevel, we're going to sit that down in the V, but let's do this. So this is a textured bevel. We'll see this shortly. But notice right here, we've got a taller end and a shorter end. The taller end, that's the heel of the tool. The shorter, that's the toe of the tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the heel of this tool and I can feel that sit down in our cut, in our swivel cut. So I'm going to hold this tool very lightly. We're actually going to use more of a jackhammer approach here. So I'm going to lay this in and now we're going to hammer, and I've got my pinky on my leather. That'll help stabilize. So now let's very lightly move along. And again, I can feel that swivel cut. Yeah, again, we're going very lightly for two reasons. First off, less tool marks. But secondly, and more importantly, I've got more control on my tool. Now let's come back, do the same thing a second time. But now I've got a good ridge right there. I can feel that. Let's hit that tool a little bit harder. Yeah, there we go. We're starting to get that effect. And with this leather, not common with lower grades of tannage, but we're actually getting a little bit of a burnish here. So now let's do this. I'm going to take again the heel of the tool, put that against my swivel line, and let's just smoothly run that down, because what we're doing is we're taking out those tool marks. Good. Okay. Now I'm going to work my way all the way around. Now, when we get to a point, let's just easily work around that point, but let's don't press too hard. We don't want to round that point off. And there we are. We've beveled and we've smoothed all the way around 2 points. We still have a few tool marks, that's okay. We're going to come in with a texture bevel. But secondly, if we push just a little too hard in some areas on our line, we're going to come back with a spoon. We're going to smooth that out, okay? So next up, textured bevel. We're going to do exactly the same thing. But because this has a texture, visually, it's going to enhance that 3D effect. But exactly the same thing. Going to put the heel of the tool right next to that line. And let's drag that along in the same fashion. And there we go. Well, that looks good thus far. Very nice. Now, if we lean our swivel, we're going to develop a lip. So if we lean out, we're going to have a lip on this line. If we lean in over here, we've hammered down this outside, but right here, let's take a spoon, and I'm simply going to run this lightly around our edge. Good, there we go. Looking better and better. In fact, looks very clean. One more detail. Let's add a stamp, and I love this stamp. It's the heart stamp. But one reason I like this is because it gives us a very good impression. So with this, we've got the small cut right at the top. I'm going to sink that right at the end of my swivel blade. but I'm going to push it out about 1/8 of an inch, give or take. Yeah, there we go. Nice touch. I'm going to do the same thing on the other 3 points. Okay, good thus far. 4 more stamps. So let's go on the inside of our swivel line. And again, I'm going to come in about 1/8 of an inch. Notice how very lightly I'm hitting the hammer, and notice the impression we're getting. That's because we've cased our leather. We're doing this right. Very cool design. We've got clean, straight lines, no difficult cuts. It's a great design to get comfortable with the tools. Simple, but it doesn't look like it. Perfect. All right, how about a few more notes? And we're back where we started. We took our time and we did this right, and the outcome reflects that. Now I'd like to give this a good 24 hours dry time. If we're going to add dye, we need this to be dry, but we don't have to add dye. I like it right where it is. Or here's a cool option. We've got what's called a neutral antique. That means we can mix that with any one of our Angelus paint colors. White, purple, both would look good. But because we used a textured bevel on our outside, that antique's going to sit nicely in that, as well as our stamps and our swivel cuts. Now, one of the foundations of carving, consistency. Absolutely. We used a straight edge to get our line straight. We absolutely see that. Now, is anybody going to ask us if we used a tool? Absolutely not. What they're going to see is clean, consistent lines. Very nice. I hope this video will help get us headed in the right direction. Let's get comfortable with those tools. Once we do, sky literally is the limit with design possibilities. We can keep it simple or we can go complicated, but we can definitely make a project our own, and we can add a stamped or carved design to any project we work with. I love stamping and carving, and I hope you will too. Good luck with your projects.